In today's video, we will discuss the top 10 HBCU dynasties of all time. Please make sure you subscribe to the Top 10 Jaw-Dropping Facts channel. Remember, new videos drop every Monday through Friday. Number 10. South Carolina State, 1976 to 82. 4 claimed titles in 7 years. Record 64 wins and 14 losses and 2 ties. Playoff record 2 wins 21 losses in AAFCS. Beat Furman 17-0 in 1982. Notable pros: Olene Edwin Bailey, 11 years in NFL, DB Barney Bussey, 10 years, DB Rufus Bess, 9 years, DB William Judson, 8 years, wide receiver Charlie Brown, 6 years, D-line Emmanuel Weaver, 2nd-round pick. The 1970s were boom times. Desegregation was in effect, but legendary coaches like Robinson, Tennessee State's John Merritt, and SC State's Willie Jeffries continued to reel in talent. Despite Grambling peaking with Doug Williams and company, and despite Florida A&M winning the inaugural FCS title in 1978, SC State still managed to stand out, claiming the 1976 and 1977 Black College titles. And after Jeffries left for Wichita State, he would return to Orangeburg in 1989. They won the 1981 and 1982 titles under Bill Davis. Maybe the most impressive thing? The Bulldogs got better after losing pros like linebacker Harry Carson, a future NFL Hall of Famer, defensive back Donnie Shell, and defensive lineman Barney Shavas. Number 9. Florida A&M, 1977 to 79. 2 HBCU titles in 3 years, plus the first ever FCS title. Wins 30 and losses 5. Won 2 and lost 0 FCS playoff record. Beat UMass 35-28 in the 1978 FCS title game. And Miami 16-13 in 1979. We're making an exception here. Yes, the Rattlers won only 2 HBCU titles in this span, while all the other teams here won at least 3. But we'll count the inaugural FCS championship, sealed with wins over Jackson State and UMass as well. I also just really wanted this team on the list so I could point out Florida A&M beat Howard Schnellenberger's first Miami team in 1979. Number 8. Tennessee State, 1982 to 84. 3 titles in a row. Won 29 and losses 3 and 2 ties. Won 1 and losses 1 FCS playoff record. Beat Chattanooga 27-21 and Eastern Illinois 20-19 in 1982 and Louisville 24-15 in 1984. Notable pros: D.N. Richard Dent, NFL Hall of Famer, running back Larry Kinnebrew, 7 years in NFL, wide receiver Mike Jones, 6 years, Olene Steve Moore, 5 years. Among the highlights in Samuel J. Friedman's Breaking the Line, the story of Florida A&M and Grambling's legendary 1967, which culminated in a 28-25 Grambling win over Florida A&M in the Orange Blossom Classic, is Robinson's fight to get NFL attention for his quarterback, James Shaq Harris. But maybe the most enjoyable parts are when Friedman gets going about how much Robinson disliked Tennessee State's Big John Merritt. If Robinson was a teacher first, Merritt was a politician. In college football terms, that means he was one hell of a recruiter. Even into the 1980s, as attracting talent to HBCUs grew more difficult. The Tigers reached the FCS quarterfinals, losing to SC State in 1981 and the semis in 1982, and Merritt retired after 8 wins and 2 losses and 1 tie in 1983. He would pass away just a couple of weeks later. TSU honored him by winning 11 wins and 0 losses under William A. Thomas in 1984. Number 7. Morgan State, 1943 to 49. 4 titles in 7 years. Wins 41 and 8 losses and 1 tie record. Notable pros: D-line Len Ford, NFL Hall of Famer after also playing at Michigan. Morgan State has only 1 conference title since the 1970s, but the Bears were once the brightest HBCU light. They dominated the 1940s, claiming the 1943, 1944, 1946, and 1949 titles under Edward P. Hurt. The best was probably the last team, which outscored opponents by a 226-32 margin, allowing more than 7 points just once. The Bears also got to claim one of the first HBCU products to truly thrive in the pros, Ford, who graduated from MSU, enlisted in the Navy and played for Michigan after the war. The pride of Washington, D.C. ended up on Paul Brown's Cleveland Browns, won 3 NFL titles, and was named to the NFL's All-Decade Team. Number 6. North Carolina A&T, 2015-18 and counting. 3 titles in 4 years. Wins 41 and 7 losses record. 0 wins and 1 loss FCS playoff record. Beat Kent State 39-36 in 2016, Charlotte 35-31 in 2017, ECU 28-23 and Jacksonville State 20-17 in 2018. Notable pros: running back Tariq Cohen, 4th round pick in 2017, Oline Brandon Parker, 3rd round pick in 2018. A&T run of FBS wins has really brought to focus the Aggies' upside. Broadway, who also got to claim shares of HBCU titles with NC Central, 2005 and 2006, and Grambling, 2007, is one of the sport's most underrated coaches, and he left Washington with a bounty, particularly in the trenches. Defensive lineman Darrell Johnson, Jr., and offensive lineman Micah Shaw were FCS All-Americans in 2018. If the Aggies win in 2021 in their new conference of the Big South, after not playing last year due to COVID-19, this could be something great for them. Number 5. Tennessee State, 1970-73. 3 titles in 4 years. Wins 41 and 2 losses record. Beat UL Lafayette 26-25 in 1970, McNeese State 26-23 in 1971, Drake 29-7 in 1972, and Middle Tennessee 23-0 in 1973. Notable pros: D.N. Too Tall Jones, 15 years in NFL, Oline Vern Holland, 10 years, Oline Robert Woods, 8 years. Merritt had already claimed 3 titles in the 1960s at Jackson State in 1962 and at TSU in 1965-66, but probably peaked in the early 1970s. From 1969 to 73, his Tigers went 48 wins and 3 losses and 1 tie, winning the Small School Showcase Grantland Rice Bowl in 1970, over what would become UL Lafayette, and 1971, over McNeese. Robinson probably really hated Merritt in these years. From 1971 to 74, 19 Tennessee State players were selected in the NFL Draft, including 8 in the first 2 rounds. Number 4. Southern, 1948-50. 3 titles in a row. Wins 32 and 0 losses and 2 ties record. Average score in this span: wins 32 and 4 losses, allowed 26 points in 11 games in 1950. While Robinson and Jake Gaither were still young, an old hand was ruling the roost from Baton Rouge. Ace Mumford had won the HBCU title at Texas College in 1935. He'd coached Southern to a HBCU basketball title in 1941, then got rolling on the gridiron in the late 1940s. In this run, Southern demolished opponents. They allowed a total of 26 points in 11 games in 1950. These days of HBCU football were particularly defined by line play and the 3 yards and a cloud of dust mantra, and Southern didn't even allow clouds of dust. Southern Stadium is named after him, but that almost goes without saying. If you want to know how respected Mumford was, look at the list of pallbearers at his funeral in 1962: Robinson, Gaither, Merritt, and pretty much every other HBCU coach of the era. Number 3. Central State, 1983-92. 7 titles in 10 years, including 5 in a row from 1986 to 90. Wins 103 and 17 losses and 2 ties record. Wins 3 and 4 losses Division II playoff record. Wins 11 and 4 losses NAIA playoff record, including national titles in 1990 and 1992. Beat Liberty 66-16 and Texas State 24-16 in 1983, Towson 31-0 in 1986, Central Arkansas 30-23, and Gardner-Webb 19-16 in 1992. Notable pros: Oline Eric Williams, 11 years in NFL, D-line Hugh Douglas, 1st round pick, 10 years, DB Vince Buck, 2nd round pick, 6 years. If Broadway is one of the most underrated coaches of the 2000s and 2010s, Billy Joe takes that honor from the 1980s and 1990s. Before he nearly built Florida A&M into an FBS caliber program at the turn of the century, he created a powerhouse out of almost nothing in Ohio. At Central State, the Villanova grad and former AFL fullback went 103 and lost 17 and 2 ties from 1983 to 92, making some noise in the D2 playoffs, then winning 2 NAIA national titles. Number 2. Grambling, 1972 to 77. 4 titles in 6 years. Wins 60 and 13 losses record. Wins 1 and 1 loss Division II playoff record. Beat Hawaii 46-7 and Nevada 37-3 in 1972, Long Beach State 29-16 and Delaware 17-8 in 1973, Hawaii 20-6 and Oregon State 19-12 in 1975, Hawaii 34-23 in 1976 and Temple 35-32 in 1977. Notable pros: QB Doug Williams, first-round pick, Super Bowl champion; D-line Gary Johnson, 11 years in NFL; wide receiver Sammy White, 10 years; wide receiver Charlie Smith, 8 years; wide receiver Dwight Scales, 8 years; DB James Hunter, first-round pick, 7 years; D-end Mike St. Clair, 7 years. Robinson coached at Grambling for more than 50 years and claimed titles in 5 different decades. This might have been his best run. It was definitely his most important. Because of segregation, HBCU programs had minimal scheduling opportunities before the 1970s, which meant that probably the most talented HBCU teams ever, those under Robinson, Gaither, Merritt, etc., in the 1960s and early 1970s, didn't get to compare themselves to the rest of college football until their members reached the pros. Tennessee State fared pretty well in a series of Grantland Rice Bowls during that period, but Grambling was the most aggressive at taking shots against what would become FBS-level competition. The Tigers went a combined win 5-0 losses against Hawaii and Oregon State in the 1970s and 1980s, split a couple of games with Temple, and nearly beat a peaking SMU in 1983. They also dominated at the HBCU level, claiming national titles in 1972, 1974, 1975, and 1977. 1982. And with alumni like receiver Charlie Joyner already in the Pro Bowl, Robinson produced constant future pros, with 13 Grambling players selected in the first 3 rounds between 1971 to 78. Number 1. Florida A&M, 1957 to 62. 4 titles in 6 years. Wins 54 and losses 4 record. Named AP Small College National Champion in 1962, the rough equivalent of being named FCS Champion. Notable pros: running back Herod Dixon, 8 years in AFL/NFL, wide receiver L. Denson, 8 years in AFL/NFL. Though Gaither's and Robinson's peaks came a mere decade apart, Gaither's came in almost a completely different era. At the turn of the 1960s, Florida A&M was playing only games against fellow HBCU competition. But they get the number 1 spot on this list because of sheer dominance. I mean, dominance. In 1957, the Rattlers beat Southern and A&T by a combined points of 74-12 on their way to a 9-0 record. In 1959, only Southern stayed within 3 touchdowns. They outscored 10 opponents by a combined 506 points to 33 in 1961. They got more dominant with each title run. From 1957 to 62, FAMU beat rival Bethune-Cookman 4 times by a combined 367 to 18. That includes a 97-0 pasting in 1960. And after a rare loss, they always got their revenge. They lost to Southern and Prairie View A&M in 1958 and beat them by a combined 49 points to 21 in 1959. They lost again to Southern in 1960 and won 46-0 in 1961. They lost the last game of 1962 to Jackson State and had to wait 16 years for revenge. They got it in the 1978 FCS semifinals. We understand now that the talent in the HBCU ranks was increasing in this period. And Florida A&M was still utterly untouchable. Gaither couldn't top Robinson in longevity. He retired in 1969 after only 25 years in charge, but not even Robinson had a stretch of quite this level either. Thanks for watching HBCU Top 10 Dynasties. Do you think we left off any teams? If so, leave a comment in the messages below. Until then, check out our new episodes every Monday through Friday.